You ever find yourself just scrolling through news headlines and you keep seeing GDP pop up?
Mm.
Gross domestic product.
All the time.
Yeah, it's constant. Their growth figures, sometimes dips,
Mhm.
surprises. But I always wonder, and maybe you do too, how does that huge number actually, filter down? How does it make a difference in the real world?
That's exactly the question we're tackling today. We're really digging into GDP, not just as some dry statistic you hear about,
Right.
but looking at it as, well, a key driver behind how governments actually work and how nations develop.
Yeah.
Think of it like understanding the engine, the engine that powers a lot of what we see happening around us.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Because it's easy to just tune out when you hear these like abstract economic terms.
Hmm.
So our mission today really is to show you how the health of a country's GDP can actually have tangible impacts. Things you experience every single day, the roads you drive on, maybe the quality of healthcare, the opportunities in education, and, well, a lot more.
So let's start at the beginning then,
Yeah.
just to make sure we're all on the same page. What exactly is GDP in simple terms?
Okay, right. So imagine trying to count up absolutely everything a country produces and provides in a whole year.
Hmm.
All the stuff made, all the services offered, everything. GDP is basically that grand total. It's expressed as a monetary value, right? The total economic output inside a country's borders, usually measured over a year.
That's a really clear way to explain it. And so when we hear that GDP is increasing, what does that signal?
Well, it basically means more activity. More stuff is being made, more services are being sold, maybe more buildings are going up, perhaps more is being exported. It
Hmm.
suggests, a more dynamic economy.
Yeah, more active. It's an indicator that things are generally humming along.
Exactly. A rising GDP, generally speaking, points to a healthier economic picture. Business is probably doing better. People might be earning a bit more. There's just more economic buzz.
Mm.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. This growth, this economic activity, it connects directly to the government's wallet, essentially. Its ability to operate and invest.
Okay, so how does that work? How does a bigger economic pie measured by GDP mean like a bigger slice for the government? What's the mechanism there?
Well, governments mostly get their money through taxes, right? All sorts of taxes.
Sure. Income tax, sales tax.
Yeah, income tax on what people earn, corporate tax on what companies make, that's sales tax or VAT you pay when you buy things. And then you've got other ones like excise duties on things like petrol or alcohol, even taxes on imports and exports,
Right. Okay, so a whole range of
a
taxes.
whole range. And as the overall economic activity, the GDP goes up,
Yeah.
what do you think happens to those tax collections?
Well, I guess they'd go up too. More activity, more transactions, more profits, more income, so more tax.
Precisely. It's pretty logical, really.
Mm.
If businesses are making more profit, they pay more corporate tax. Simple.
Mm.
If more people have jobs and maybe get pay rises, the government collects more income tax.
Right.
And, if people feel a bit more confident and have more money, they tend to spend more. So more buying means more collected from sales tax and those excise duties too. So like every time someone buys that bottle of wine or fills up their car, if the economy's buzzing, the government gets a slightly bigger piece over time.
So it's quite a direct link then. A healthier, growing GDP almost automatically leads to the government pulling in more tax revenue across the board.
That's the general idea, yes.
Mm.
Think of it almost like a positive feedback loop. A strong economy generates more tax money for the government.
Okay.
And that gives the government more financial flexibility. They might be able to spend more on public services or big projects without having to borrow as much money, or maybe they could even use it to pay down existing national debt.
And this increased revenue, this is where we get to the really exciting part, isn't it? This is the fuel that can power national development,
Mhm.
making real changes.
Absolutely. This is where that abstract GDP number starts to feel, well, real, where it translates into potential improvements in people's lives. So let's explore some specific areas where this extra government funding, fueled by GDP growth, can make a huge difference. Maybe start with infrastructure.
Good place to start. Infrastructure is like the bedrock of a modern economy, isn't it?
COBA.
We're talking about the really fundamental stuff, the roads, the railways, airports, seaports, all the networks that let a country actually function properly.
And these things are massive investments. They cost a fortune to build and then to maintain as well.
Oh, yeah. Huge costs.
But a growing GDP gives the government the capacity, the funds, to actually tackle these big projects.
Right.
And it's not just about, say, having a smoother drive to work.
No, it's much bigger than that.
Right. These investments help businesses grow by making it easier and cheaper to move goods around. They create a lot of jobs, especially in construction, and they just make the whole system, the logistics, more efficient, which in turn can actually boost the economy even more. It's sort of cyclical.
It really is. And we've seen this happen, haven't we? Countries hitting a period of strong growth and then launching major infrastructure programs. Any examples come to mind?
Oh, definitely. Think about India, for instance. After years of pretty solid GDP growth, they launched huge initiatives like uh, Fratmala, which is focused on massively upgrading the national highway network,
Right, I've heard that.
and also Sagarmala, which is all about developing their ports and waterways.
Mm,
The whole idea is better connectivity, boosting trade, making the economy more efficient.
makes sense. So, moving from the physical foundations, what about people, human capital? How does GDP growth help with education and skills?
Another crucial area.
Yeah.
With more tax revenue coming in, governments can choose to invest more in education across the board.
So, like building more schools.
Yeah, building schools, maybe upgrading existing ones, funding better training programs for teachers, which is so important, offering more scholarships or financial aid so more people can actually afford university or college, improving the universities themselves, and even investing in things like digital learning platforms, trying to make education more accessible to everyone.
And the payoff for investing in education, that's usually seen as a long-term benefit, right?
Well, absolutely.
Does-
It's a long game.
Yeah.
But a well-educated, skilled population is generally more productive. They're more innovative.
Yeah.
And that makes the whole country more competitive on the world stage. You see many countries, after periods of strong, sustained GDP growth, managing to offer free, or at least heavily subsidized, education, it becomes feasible.
Okay. And what about healthcare? That's another massive area of public spending. How does GDP tie into that?
Well, the importance of a strong healthcare system became incredibly clear to everyone recently, didn't it?
Definitely. The pandemic really highlighted that.
Exactly. So a healthier economy, a higher GDP, allows governments to funnel more resources into healthcare. That could mean building more hospitals or clinics, equipping them properly, training more doctors, nurses, and other health professionals, investing in medical research to find new treatments, and just generally making healthcare more accessible and affordable, whether through public systems or maybe subsidies.
And again, like education, investing in the population's health surely pays off economically too. Healthier people are more productive.
Precisely. It's an investment in well-being, but also in economic potential. Think about countries like, say, Sweden or Canada. They have universal healthcare systems,
Right. Funded by taxes.
largely funded through taxes, yeah, which is made possible by their generally strong, stable economies over the long term. And even in countries without fully universal systems, you see expansions, like the Ayushman Bharat health insurance scheme in India. Its expansion has definitely been helped by India's sustained economic growth, providing more resources.
Okay, so infrastructure, education, healthcare. What about helping those who might be left behind by economic growth? Poverty alleviation, social welfare.
That's a really important point, because growth doesn't automatically benefit everyone equally, does it?
No, definitely not.
So increased government funds, thanks to GDP growth, can also support vital social safety nets. Programs designed to help people who are struggling.
Like what sort of programs?
Things like food distribution schemes for the very poor, unemployment benefits for people who lose their jobs, maybe subsidies or schemes to help people access affordable housing, and pension schemes for older citizens. These all become more affordable for a government when the economy is doing well and tax revenues are up.
And that's really key for like inclusive development, isn't it? Making sure the benefits are shared more widely.
Absolutely. It's about trying to ensure that economic progress lifts as many people as possible.
Yeah.
That the rising tide, as they say, lifts all boats, or at least provides life jackets for those whose boats aren't rising. Welfare programs help bridge that gap.
Makes sense. Okay, one more area, then what about the future? Technology, innovation, how does GDP fit in there?
Ah, yeah, the exciting stuff. A strong economic base, reflected in a healthy GDP, allows governments to invest in the future through science and technology.
So funding research.
Exactly. Funding basic scientific research, which might not have immediate commercial applications, but is crucial for long-term discovery. Supporting national space programs, think about ISRO in India or NASA in the US. These are heavily reliant on public funds,
Right. They wouldn't exist without government backing.
pretty much. A strong GDP gives a country the financial muscle to make these big long-term bets on science and technology, supporting things like tech incubators to help new companies get started.
And these kinds of investments can lead to major breakthroughs, right? Things that change society.
Definitely. Government funding can push forward research in AI or green technologies needed to tackle climate change or biotechnology. It's about staying competitive, solving future problems, and creating new opportunities for the next generation.
Okay, so we've painted a picture where GDP growth fuels government revenue, which can then fund all these amazing developments, infrastructure, education, health, welfare, tech. But is it always that simple? Does more money automatically mean good things happen?
Ah, that's the crucial caveat, isn't it? You're absolutely right.
Right.
Just because the government has more money rolling in doesn't automatically guarantee it will be spent wisely or effectively.
Right. There needs to be something else.
Exactly. This is where things like good governance, transparency, and accountability become absolutely critical. Increased revenue offers potential, huge potential, but it only really benefits the country if it's managed well, responsibly, and honestly, with the public's best interests at heart.
So the key point here is that just having GDP growth isn't enough. You need smart policies alongside it and ways to make sure the money isn't, well, wasted or lost to corruption.
Precisely. You need strong institutions, checks and balances, and oversight. Otherwise, you can have economic growth, but the benefits don't reach the people, or the money gets frittered away on inefficient projects, or worse, disappears.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually where citizens play a huge role
How's
by being engaged, by asking questions, paying attention to what elected officials are doing, using your vote thoughtfully, participating in local community matters. All these things help create pressure for better governance and ensure that the benefits of economic growth are actually used to improve lives.
So it's not just about the economy growing, but about how society manages that growth.
Couldn't agree more.
No.
So let's just quickly recap the main thread here. We've seen how GDP growth, that increase in economic activity, generally leads to more tax revenue for the government.
Right. More money coming in.
And that increased revenue creates the potential for the government to invest more in really vital areas, building infrastructure, improving education and healthcare, supporting people through welfare programs, and funding innovation for the future. All things that can lead to a better quality of life for everyone.
But, and it's a big but, the real measure of success isn't just that GDP number going up. It's about how effectively, how ethically, and how strategically those extra resources are actually used to build a genuinely better, more equitable future for all the country's citizens. The how is just as important, maybe even more important, than the how much.
Perfectly put. It's not just about baking a bigger cake. It's about how you slice it and who gets a piece.
Exactly.
And maybe that leads us to a final thought for everyone listening. Considering everything we've talked about today, this link between the economy, government funds, and national development, if you were thinking about a country's current economic situation, what specific areas of development do you think should be the absolute top priorities? Where should that focus be? Definitely something to mull over.